circumstance doesn't allow us to always feel good. And that's a misnomer. And if you go on social media, 10 ways to be happy, 20 ways to be happy, it's like this constant pressure, right? And what underneath that, if you think about subliminally, what is it saying? If you're disappointed and sad, don't be, because like there's something wrong with you. And if you are, quickly change your mindset, which is BS.
Welcome to Lessons in Leverage, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of success. We'll help you unlock the secrets of leverage so you can amplify your impact in the world. Here is your host, Spencer Lowe.
Welcome back to another episode of Lessons in Leverage. I'm your host, Spencer Lowe, and today we have a truly inspiring guest joining us. We have Dr. Michelle P. Maidenberg, who's a powerhouse in the world of mental health and personal development. As the co-founder of Thru My Eyes, which is a nonprofit, she empowers individuals facing chronic illness to leave meaningful video legacies for their loved ones. Michelle is also the author of Ace Your Life, where she reveals her transformative ACE method, which is grounded in acceptance, compassion, and empowerment. In this episode, we're going to explore how shifting your mindset can unlock your potential and help you become your best self. Whether you're looking to improve your personal life or enhance your professional journey, Michelle's insights promise to help bring leverage to your life and help you get more out of your life. Michelle, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So we were talking a little bit before we got started here, and I am excited to hear a little bit about your journey because, you know, almost nothing meaningful comes on accident. You know, nobody just stumbles onto a really meaningful kind of life work. And so I'm always fascinated with these key moments and experiences in our life that set us on a course that we can find so much fulfillment in. So tell me a little bit for you about what that story was that got you started on the ACE method and helping people with, you know, acceptance, compassion, and empowerment.
So it's still unfolding. It never ends. I want to say our journey never ends. And, you know, when you think about it and you think back, like, you know, over the course of your life, like everything kind of fits in. You realize that one thing led to another. And, you know, people always come to me sometimes with regret. Like, how did I do that? Or why did I choose that person? Or what was I thinking about when I chose that career? Or whatever the case is. And I always tell them, you only are speaking from the present moment because you had that past experience. That past you did not know what you know today. And you only know it because you went through your experience. So our journey is constantly evolving, like day in and day out. Like for me, you know, I think my life's journey started when I was a little kid. You know, I grew up with 4 Holocaust survivor grandparents, and all of their families were, you know, murdered, unfortunately, in Europe. And I grew up with intergenerational trauma, like massive trauma. And I see it like the fabric kind of, you know, woven through with my parents. You know, and I didn't realize this when I was younger. This just actually came to me that I was made to do this. Like I knew I wanted to do this for when I was really young. But I realize now it's because one of my grandmothers particularly, she was very, very expressive. And she spoke about stories about the war. I mean, I heard these stories when I was like really young, but I didn't know the impression it was making on me. I had no clue. And I'm an empath by nature. So I think hearing them day in and day out, week by week, it really kind of evoked my empathy for others, for people, you know, in terms of being a helper. And I knew nobody in the field, but it just again, and then, you know, my parents divorced when I was 3. There was a lot of chaos in my life. I mean, tremendous amount of chaos growing up. And then through my own life, I realized that my kind of coping skill, my adaptation was repression. Like I learned, I'm like a master repressor. And I learned that. And I learned that through my marital relationship, unfortunately, because I was married for 25 years and, you know, recently divorced. And I repressed. I repressed because I didn't want to break up my family. I wanted to maintain my family. And you know, it was good enough to stay in it. But then when I really soul searched and recognized that maybe this is not really working for me, you know, and for us, I should say, you know, I came to different conclusions. And I realized even through people I've dated or just on my journey, like how it all fits, it all makes sense. And every person, like I appreciate every relationship. And I was talking to somebody the other day and they were like in shock, but I said, you know what? If I had to kind of go back in time and do things over, I wouldn't do anything different, because a person that I parented my children with was the person I was meant to parent with. And I value him so much. I respect him. We have an incredible relationship. People sometimes think it's strange, but like we have a respectful, kind, caring relationship. And we both appreciate each other, which I appreciate. I have gratitude that I have that type of relationship. And again, when I look at my kids, I'm like, that's why they're like, functioning really well. And I'm so thankful for that. But I see it. I see it with every person in my life, whether it's painful, because it is, don't get me wrong, I still appreciate it. I walk away with gratitude, and it gives me knowledge and information on how I want to proceed in my life. With this particular method of stuck, and this is really a method of stuckness, we always have stuckness throughout our life. It always comes up, whether it's interpersonal relationships, in our careers, with our children. Again, it evolves over time. It could be a behavior that we're exhibiting. I see behind you, there's Atomic Habits, which is a great book. And I write about that in my book, in the empowerment chapter. We're always trying to work through something. And if you're not working through something, then you're repressing or denying or avoiding. So that's not a good coping skill. So this is a fascinating story. When we had business cards like years ago?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I never used my business cards. So one day I was just cleaning out my office and I found them, my stack of business cards. And when I was writing my book, I had a different word for C. I can't even remember what it was. It wasn't compassion though. And my editor came to me and she said, you know what? I've been thinking about it. And I actually did this like kind of word search. You use the word compassion more than you use this other word. I think you should actually use the word compassion in your title and not this other word. And I said, you know what? That makes so much sense. And that fits. Well, I took out my card, my business card. And I'm not only because I'll show you, it's like fascinating. On the back of my business cards, it says acceptance, compassion, and empowerment. I can't even make this up. This was in me. Like, it's insane. Yeah. I literally, I sat here and I was like in shock. I was like, how did this happen? Like, this was like in me, it was brewing and I didn't even know it. Like, that was just, mind blowing. Anyway, yeah.
So I was just going to say, I love a couple of things you highlighted there. One, this idea that it's so easy to get lost in regret and not have proper gratitude for the pain, the difficulty, the struggle that have built us into the people we've become. And that perspective can dramatically change how we feel about ourselves, about others, and we can be in a totally different emotional state based on that. And so there's so much wisdom already just in how we choose to label the things that have occurred, how we choose to think about them, the value we choose to get out of them. Were they for our good? Did they help us grow? Did we benefit from them, even if they were hard, traumatic, painful? Or, did they make us a victim? Did they leave us, with nothing we could do? Did they, do we give them all this power to hold us down for years to come? And the other thing is that, you mentioned this idea of how everything fits together in hindsight. And I love that because the more confident we are in that, I have found that it's really useful to start to realize everything coming is happening, fits together as well. It's just that we don't see how yet. That looking back, for me, gives me a lot of confidence of like, okay, if I can look back and see how these random events and these painful things and these like detours that didn't seem at the time to make sense, or that I was so frustrated with, actually added up to this really valuable, rewarding life that I have now. How much confidence can I have that as each new obstacle comes up, it's part of the story. It's part of a future story that I'll look back on with that same fondness. And so I know that's something that's really helped me a lot. And I think it's important for people to really hear that as you're saying that. It's such a powerful message that it's not on accident. It's not just random. It really does fit together. And you're going to have that perspective at some point if you don't know.
Exactly. And confidence is born. It's not, again, we're not born with confidence, right? We have to cultivate it over time. And that is exactly, people tend to be more productive and in line with being their best self and living the life they want when they have confidence. Okay. Somebody is feeling deflated and demoralized, they don't act on behalf of their values. It's just a fact. So how do we cultivate that? That's really what we're trying to do. And that's what my whole book is about. What I found in my practice working with, patients is these are the places that we're not taught, first of all. There are many barriers that get in the way of us cultivating ourselves. And we need to be aware of what those are in order to be in conscious awareness. So, the structure of my book, really, I start out by talking about our neurophysiology. We need to know our brain, and we need to know how we function in order to understand, because that could be a barrier. The second chapter talks about our values. So the underpinning of all of this is our core values. Values is instrumental in living a fulfilling life. And most people will tell me, they'll try to convince me, I know what my values are. And I was on a call, I was on a podcast, the other day, and the person was like, oh, I know what my values are. And then they started talking to me about something. And I said, actually, you need to go a little deeper. And then when I was like kind of talking them through it, they were like, oh my goodness, I never thought about it that way. I was like, yeah. So we think, and I'll give you a personal example. When I was doing my kind of values cards, what came up as a primary core value for me was connection. Now, I know I'm a very kind of social, warm, I see myself as a connected person because I'm an empath by nature. And I realized that a lot of my behaviors was not in line with it because I'm an extremely busy person. I wear many, many hats. And people would, colleagues, friends would call me up. Oh, let's get together. I want to see whatever. And I would always say, I'm too busy. Always. And I really was busy, but that doesn't mean that I have to necessarily decline their offer, because that's not very caring and connected. So now I am so conscious of it. And I'll say, listen, I'm so busy for the next couple of weeks. Let's put something in the calendar, because then it won't happen. I make a conscious effort. And then I'm able to do a values review at the end of my day, every day, because I do that. And I'm able to say, what did I do to, again, lean into my values, right? That's in line with who I want to be. And I'm able to consciously build my confidence by being aware that I did something instrumental and proactive to lean into my value. So that is something in my conscious awareness at all times. So we do, again, go through our values. And then again, the 3 other sections with acceptance, compassion, empowerment. I first start off with each one talking about our barriers. There's social, cultural barriers. There's personal values. There's, again, we have genetic predisposition for things. There's our neurocognition. I could go on and on. And then how do we integrate it? We never learn these things. We don't. I tried to integrate social emotional learning into like my kids' school, and I gave them platform for which to integrate it for free and a pretty seamless way. And what was I told? Sorry, the kids are too busy academically. And I sat there, I'm like I want to pull my hair out. Like, these kids need to be functional humans. And guess what? They could be really academic and bright, but if they can have good coping skills and emotional regulation and socialization skills, guess what? They're not going to even be able to land a job. So, what's the point? Anyway, I could go on about that, but that's a whole other skills to really integrate, so I give experiential exercises at the end of each chapter. I actually give a barcode, which I publish on my YouTube channel every Thursday, a new guided meditation. So every chapter integrates with a guided meditation that you would, kind of listen to. So when I help people with these skills, they use the lingo. It's amazing. I have teenagers who come to me. They're like, I didn't quite lean into my values today, and I need to do a better job. And tomorrow I'm going to do this. The reason why also it's so important is another 2 reasons. One is we are constantly in this abyss where we are making decisions and we have conflicting values.
Yep.
Okay, so it's not like, do I want vanilla ice cream or chocolate ice cream? It's, do I want to do my career event or do I want to do my child event as a working mom? Now, that's going to be a really hard decision to make.
Yeah.
Those are the decisions that get us stuck. And we have a hard time making movement. And then we feel guilt and shame and we berate ourselves and we can't sleep at night because we're overthinking and worrying and whatever. And then it affects our self-concept and our self-identity and how we see ourselves and the names we call ourselves. when you understand that and you're able to effectively problem solve through this methodology, it is a life changer. It's transformative. I'm not even kidding. Yeah. So that's one thing. And the other thing too is we also berate ourselves when we're not in line with our values for whatever reason, because we feel like we've disappointed ourselves. We're shameful. But the reason why this is so empowering is you could see to yourself, right? I'm not a bad mother. I had a bad mothering moment, you know? And like today, I didn't lean into my values in exactly the way that I wanted to, but tomorrow I am going to make that concerted, intentional effort to do it because that's how I want to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
I just saw a post this morning on X by a friend of mine. He was asking about balancing this exact thing, work and family. And he said, he gave some examples that he had interviewed some highly successful people. And all of them, when he asked them, you know, what their biggest regret was, said, well, I should have spent more time with my family. And he followed up with, you know, if you had have done that, would you be as successful? I said, probably not. And he sort of put the question out there of like, has anyone figured this out? You know, and I don't know that I have it figured out, but one of the things that I've experienced in this area is right in line with what you're saying, which is I think people use more as a compensation for low quality. So in other words, if I'm not confident that I had a high quality set of outcomes with my kids, then my answer is I probably should have spent more time. But no one really defines what more is. Like a lot of these people that have that regret don't say, well, what is more? Is that 1 extra hour a day? Is that 5 extra hours a day? Is that, and a lot of the people who are saying this actually have complete control over their calendar. So if they really thought that they needed more, they could do more. And so it's this idea that because they're not clear on their values, they think the answer is just, well, I need to spend more time. But they might already be spending a lot of time with their kids. They're just on their phone. They're just distracted. They're not honoring what the real value is, which is, man, even if I was only with my kids for 45 minutes today, but we connected and we talked about the, you know, deep things and they felt loved and I was really present, I might feel really proud of myself at the end of the day as a father versus I might have spent 4 hours with them, but I was distracted. I didn't pay attention. I was short-tempered. And at the end I go, man, I was a bad father. And so just that progression you just talked about of your values into like what the narrative becomes about your identity and how you feel about yourself. I think when people see that, the natural coping that I've seen should be more time on that. But we have plenty of time. It's just, we need better quality goals in those areas, better clarity on values and what it means to live that way. And so I certainly have experienced that in my life where there's been times that have been high quantity of work hours or of personal hours and didn't feel satisfied with it, or other times where there was low quantity but really high quality and I felt very satisfied. So that's something you see with your clients, that there's this. What are some of those patterns of like how people might cope? Is it a quantity thing? What other elements of that do you see that people reconcile?
Yeah. So I think what you said is so interesting and important, but I work on mindset. It's a little bit different. So I'm going to take what you said and I'm going to like show you how to maybe think about it. Right? Yeah. So first of all, quality and quantity would be defined on how you're defining your value. Okay. So I always say it's not about being like, what does parenting mean? Or what does being an effective worker mean? Or what does it mean to be an like a connected partner, whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, right? Yep. It's being good enough. Okay. Everybody gets to define what that is. Now, for somebody who has a tumultuous relationship with their parent because their parent doesn't have appropriate boundaries, I'm just using that as an example, being a good enough child may mean setting very strict boundaries with their parents. Okay? That doesn't mean that they're doing it less than they should or could. It means they're doing what they need to do in order for them to maintain their mental health and whatever, right? So we get to define what good enough means. And that, I think, is kind of in line with what you're saying, quality, quantity, etc. But again, if you look at it a little bit differently in terms of mindset, it's the guilt and shame that we carry over our behaviors, okay? And we get wrapped into quantifying and qualifying. No, it's not about quantifying or qualifying. It's more about, if I understand that, and I'll just use the example I used before. that I need to do a career-driven activity, okay? Because I have a client like that's here from out of town and this is like a one-shot deal and I have to do it, let's say. I've discovered and I've kind of came to the conclusion that I must do this. I can't go to my child's event or whatever the case is. I'm going to feel guilt that I'm not with my child, okay? I'm going to feel guilt that now why am I feeling guilt? I'm feeling guilt because I am an attentive, attuned parent. And I have to actually appreciate and I have to respect that part of me that wants to be an attuned, present parent. So I am actually proud of my guilt. Okay? So when I'm sitting here feeling guilty, gosh, I'm not with my kid, I could say, good for me. I am so proud of myself. Like, would I really want to be like, yay, I'm going to see my client, screw my kid, you know? No. Like, I am actually proud. When I feel those guilt-ridden feelings, it actually connects me and makes me in tune with how my parenting value is so formative for me. Okay? Then I could go to, okay, because my parenting value is so important to me, how am I going to still respect that part of me that wants to be there with my child? So instead of cutting that part off of me, which is what we do because we feel the guilt and shame, and we're kind of like this, right? Because we don't want to feel those negative feelings. So I'm going to go to my event, but like, I'm not going to deal with that because it's too painful. I'm going to say to my kid, listen, I am so sad I can't be there for you. And there's nothing I would want more than to be there for you. And because I can't, what could I do that's going to make you feel that you're attuned to in the way that I want to? Let's talk about this, let's work it through, or, right? So I might ask somebody to, kind of video it for me. I may that night sit down with my child and say, like, I want to hear every detail of what happened because I want to be as if I was there with you. Okay. So it's not about quality or quantity. It's about aligning with my value in a way that connects me with how formative it is to me, that I could, at the end of my day, I could say, yeah, I would have liked to have been there with my child. I couldn't be. And I had to prioritize my values in that moment. And if there is another moment, I might prioritize my child because that will be appropriate for that circumstance. So it doesn't make me a good parent, a bad parent. It doesn't make me a good, career-driven woman or not. I am whole because both are formative for me. It's a little bit of a shift in the mindset.
Certainly. And so if I'm hearing you correctly, if we work through the values, we understand our values well enough, and we appreciate and align our behaviors as closely as possible to those values, then we'll know that we're sort of meeting our own personal standards for ourselves of living our values, and we can feel confident, even though we can't be all things at all times, we can feel confident in the outcome of, all right, this is how I've achieved to sort of lived my values to the fullest today or this week or this time period. And I appreciate all of that. And now I don't need to look back on regret and say, oh, I need more time with my kids, or I needed to spend more hours at work, or I needed to spend, because right. I always think that when you're doing that, when you're going back in that regret, you almost have to forget all the other constraints that were there when you made the choice. You kind of have to forget that you still loved your kids back then and you did make a decision, or you made one of these trade-off decisions. But now if you want to go back and regret it, you kind of got to forget that there was like valid reasons to make the decision you made. Or maybe there wasn't, in which case, good, regret it. But it's just to say, it seems like usually when we end up going back and judging ourselves, my experience is that it ends up feeling like to do that, I have to forget all the intentions and all the effort that did go into making those decisions in line with my values at the time.
Right. Well, we can control our thoughts and feelings. That's part of the difficulty. The only thing we have control over is our behavior. Our brain is going to do what it's going to do. It is constantly in this position where it is trying to protect us from discomfort and danger. Okay? constantly. We cannot control it. Guilt, totally fine. Disappointment, totally fine. Sadness, totally fine. Bring it on. They all have utility. Yeah. And they tell us something about what's important to us. That's what we connect to. Like, I am proud when I feel guilt over not being an attentive parent. I actually appreciate that. And I feel proud of that. And if we're perpetually in our conscious awareness with intent, we are always going to be in line with our values. We are always going to be living a life where we're our best self. And we're always going to be proud of ourselves. That's the whole point. You know, circumstance doesn't allow us to always feel good. And that's a misnomer. And if you go on social media, 10 ways to be happy, 20 ways to be happy, it's like this constant pressure, right? And what underneath that, if you think about subliminally, what is it saying? If you're disappointed and sad, don't be, because like there's something wrong with you. And if you are, quickly change your mindset, which is BS, because like we're humans and the thoughts and feelings are going to percolate just because, you know, and the problem becomes when we have thoughts about our thoughts, feelings about our feelings, feelings about our thoughts, and thoughts about our feelings. And guess what? Then we can't sleep at night and then we perseverate, right? And that's what happens. Like, I know when I do a behavior that's not exactly in line with my values, I can't get it out of my mind. Like, I repeat it, right? Because I'm like thinking, maybe I should have done this, or maybe I should have said it that way, or maybe, you know, like you get all that, like you spiral. That's what we do. We spiral. But if you're in your conscious awareness, that doesn't happen. It's like really amazing, you know?
So when you're saying in your conscious awareness, what you're meaning with that is essentially that when you feel that feeling of regret or, you know, feeling like you didn't live up to your values in some way, that if in that moment you can appreciate that's a valuable signal, that's, you know, in continuity with who you are, that is a valuable, it's a connection to who you are. It's a connection to your identity to say, I would want to feel, I would want to feel regret for that because it's not in line with my general normal identity. So I appreciate that. And by accepting it there, your experience is then that people will not ruminate over it and sort of, you know, like you said, thoughts about your thoughts, feelings about your feelings. I like wording it that way, where there's all this extra baggage and wasted sort of effort and time in your own head. Did I get that right?
Yeah. And what we also have to know, what we also have to realize is that there's pain and values and values and pain. So when you're feeling pain, you know that it's rubbing up against a value, right? And when a value is rubbed up against, you're going to feel pain. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. And that's a good thing, again, because everything that happens connects you to it so that you know you need to realign. It's constant realigning, recalibrating, right? Regrounding, recentering. And when that happens, I'm like, cool, right? Like, cool. You know, like even, you know, I started dating again, right? And because I got out of a relationship recently, and I'm so mindful now, like more than ever. And I say to myself, if I were seeing myself as worthy, what decisions and selections would I make? And I really see that with each moment, like, because there were times like, oh, maybe I should meet him. He seems pretty nice. And then I'm like, no, like there's a red flag there. And like, it's not giving me a good vibe. If I was worthy, I wouldn't even bother, because like, I don't want to waste my time. My time is valuable, you know? So it's a whole other experience. Like when you go into it with this confidence and with this mindset, you know, you act differently, you behave differently, your mindset is different, and you attract different. That's the whole point too, you know? And I, like I said, it's a transformation. And listen, nobody's perfect. I don't always behave in line with my values, but I could learn from it. And I could say that's part of accepting your humanness too, right? Because our humanness, listen, it's not easy. Like we all have stuff under the hood. Like that's just the way it is. And we do need to heal from whatever it is. And that's what I help people do and understand. So when I say acceptance, people are like, I don't want to accept the way I am. If I accept the way I am, then I'm going to accept mediocrity. That's not good. And I'm like, no, that's not what we're talking about. When we say accepting, we're talking about noticing. We're not ever want to settle for mediocrity, right? Compassion. Do we ever learn to be compassionate towards ourselves? No, we learn to be compassionate towards others. That is the constant communication from when we're little tiny kids. I don't care what religion, what race, what socioeconomic status you're in, right? It's like, and by the way, this is universal too, because I've been doing podcasts, people from India, from all over the world, and this is universal, right? Empowerment. Guess what? Those books, like the one behind you, amazing. I read every single one of them. Love, seriously. But you know what the big issue is? I find we know how to change behavior. We don't know how to sustain it over time. That is where people get stuck. It's not about changing behavior. I do a lot of health and wellness, and I'll ask people at my workshops, how many of you have lost weight? And all the hands go up, right? I'm like, how many of you have sustained it over time? Hands down. We have so many resources. There's like millions of self-help books. There's millions, like in the past couple of years, how many habit books have you seen?
Yeah, lots.
Lots. Bestsellers. But guess what? People come into my office and they can't maintain behavior. As much as they're being taught of how to change habits, they can't maintain it. That is where the magic is. And that's what I help with.
Yeah, I think that it's kind of like there's all the logical side, and the books do a great job outlining sort of the theory, the logical, the practices, the behavior. And we're deeply emotionally driven animals. It's sometimes it's like, oh, I'm not emotional. It's like, okay, well, you don't know yourself very well probably then, because we're all deeply emotional. Like there's so much, and sometimes we sort of culturally even diminish that as if it's less valuable or less real, but it is the key driver I have found in my life behind most of these other things. And so, to your point, that the behavior doesn't get sustained if the emotional state isn't right. If I can't manage that part first, then the behavior, certainly there's a relationship between them in terms of my behavior starts to impact my emotional state. But if one's going to really spiral everything out, it's going to be my emotions that then take me down either the wrong behavior or just feeling stuck, like you said. And so, knowing that we're under equipped to be able to deal with that emotional side. But I want to go back to something you said and dig a little deeper, because you mentioned this idea of acceptance not being accepting mediocrity. And so how do you work through that with a client? Specifically, kind of the example that I'm thinking of is just, let's say that I feel some negative emotion and I am trying to figure out like that balance of, should I just accept this as a good signal? Like it's good that I feel guilty because that's part of me. Or do I want that to be part of me? Or do I need to actually look at changing my values? Is this a value that was sort of just conditioned on me over years that I don't really choose or I don't identify with anymore? How do you sort of navigate or help people navigate when it's time to just accept and move on and be happy with sort of your value structure versus when it's like, we really got to look at if that's really even a value I want to hold?
Yeah. So it's interesting because I do differentiate between values. There are values that we acquire, values that we aspire, and values that are circumstantial. Yeah. So we get very into the intricate details of the values. Yeah. It's a whole process. It's like a very intense process. Yeah. So, which is hard to explain on the time that we're sitting here. Obviously, I have a whole chapter on it.
Well, everyone's going to go find the ACE method and read it and get deeper, but you can give us the surface level.
Yeah, but yeah, we need to understand that. So it's not about changing values, because there's still an undercurrent of why we hold it near and dear to us. There's still, and we have to understand the benefit we get out of our behaviors. I think that we lose sight of that, and I think it does lead to a lot of stuckness and barriers when we don't understand that. Why would you continually engage in a behavior if you weren't getting benefit out of it? It doesn't make sense.
Certainly.
And I'm not saying that the benefits are always positive, because most often actually it's negative.
Yep.
Okay. But that's part of facing ourselves. Like, what are you getting out of this that you continue to engage in that behavior? So we do, again, a whole evaluation about that too. So in terms of what you asked about, do you, continue, it's really more about continuing the behavior. Because like I said, we can change thoughts and feelings. It could happen that the thoughts and feelings could change, and that does happen, right? When you recalibrate and when you get kind of a better self-awareness and etc. That does happen with transformation, but that's not ever the goal. ever. I never, ever, people will say to me, the first thing they'll say to me, I don't want to feel this way anymore. And I'm like, sweetie, I'm not in the profession of doing lobotomies. I'm so sorry. And they laugh because I can't change your brain. Like I can't, even medication can't change your brain, by the way. It can't. Like people even that take medication, they're like, oh, but like I still feel anxious. I'm like, that's a good thing. We don't want to get rid of the anxiety. We may want to like lower the volume because that's the goal. We don't want it to be overarching that it takes over, but you still need to feel the feelings because again, it connects you to who you want to be, right? So like when we're talking about acceptance and understanding how you want to be, your values guide your behavior. You get to discover that. And I say to them, how are we defining this? What behaviors are you going to do on a daily basis to lean into this value? What are you committing to? And very often somebody will come back to me and I'll say, so how'd it go? Oh, I didn't do it. No, I didn't get to it. I was too busy. I didn't feel like it. I tried, and I do this little exercise when people like do the trying card. I'm like, okay, try to stand up. And they look at me, huh? I'm like, try to stand up, try to stand up. So they're like, they're trying to stand up. I'm like, no, try to stand up. And they keep on, I'm like, okay, what are you doing? So they start laughing. I'm like, that's what trying is. No, we don't want to try. You're going to do it. And if you're not doing it, what's getting in the way of it? Like, talk to me, and by the way, sometimes people are in a position where they're not willing. Okay. And that's okay too. I respect where they're at. Listen, if you told me 20 years ago that I would be divorced, I would laugh in your face and I would not believe what you're telling me. If you told it to me 10 years ago, I would not believe you. Like literally, I wasn't in that space and nothing anybody would have told me or any conclusion I would have came to, I wasn't ready at that time. I just wasn't. I had to go through my process and my evolution. So there are times that, and I have to tell you, it's so wonderful. I sometimes see like, young adults, teens, and, of course their parents make them come in and, because they're of some issue and they come in and like, they're here, they tolerate me, and like, I teach them skills, and they're less anxious when they leave and whatever else. And then but like half of them are like here, to their dismay, or like half the time I'm with them, they wish like they could throw me out the window, sort of thing. And I can't even tell you how many of them circle back to me, okay, years later, and they'll say to me, I remember when you told me blank, 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 or now I'm ready to work. And I have a whole bunch of those individuals. And if you see the position they're in now, like I could literally cry because it is so heartwarming to see the transformation because they're willing and because they're committed and because they're ready. So not everybody's in that space and you have to kind of accept and respect where people are at also. And that's why people leave relationships, by the way, right? Because like sometimes you're on a different frequency, right? Sometimes people are just not invested in making change and they're okay the way they are. And that's perfectly okay, perfectly okay. You could respect that, So that, that's really kind of part of it, if that makes sense, and I talk a lot about that. Like we have to respect kind of where we're at, where we're going, what we want out of our lives. And it's not for everybody, it isn't. But I always say that it's important to have that information and to access it when you're ready to.
And so from what your answer was there, I want to see if I'm understanding it correctly. So the way that you think about values, your values don't ever change. You're just in a constant state of sort of discovering them. There's not really, you would say the values are really at such a deep level of sort of meeting your needs that they are just there. That's sort of a static identity at the very bottom. And then as your circumstances change and your experiences change, you're going through life, you're sort of trying to discover why you have the emotions around them and sort of what plugs into them. Do I got that right?
Yes. And developmentally we change,
Mm.
we're always evolving. Like, were you the same person that you were 10 years ago? I hope
Oh,
not.
not even close. No. So that's why I'm asking this, because to me, I would say my values have shifted
Yeah.
significantly over time, but I think that's probably a semantic difference of just what I mean by values versus what you're describing by values. That's why I'm trying to dig in and understand.
Totally, totally. And I could tell you that, like, I always recalibrate. I think, and it's so interesting when I do a values review, like with my, patients, as you could very well imagine. But a lot of them, I redo it years later. Fascinating. And what's so amazing about that? They see it. They're like, wow. I once did, it was so fascinating. I did this values review with somebody, and they were quite, they were on the younger side. And it was amazing. I looked at them, and it's also very interesting the way in which they do it. And it's hard to explain because I'm not telling you about kind of the mechanics of it, and also what comes out of the values. And I looked at the person and I looked at her and I said to her, oh my goodness, look at these values. Every single one of them is in relation to others. There's nothing here about you. Like, I'm looking at this and I don't know who you are, literally. And she looked at me and she started crying. And because she's so enmeshed with her mother, it was like, yeah, she didn't know where she started and where she ended because they were so enmeshed. And then we did a values review years later, and it was astonishing. It was so beautiful. And she cried again because she saw the difference. She saw like how she shifted. And it was so beautiful, where it was literally such a nice balance between values that were predicated on her in relationship to others, and then values predicated on her relation to herself. So she had self-efficacy, and she had self-love and self-compassion, and she integrated those skills. And I was like, yeah, like I was celebrating her in that moment. It was so amazing.
That's awesome. Well, I know we've got limited time left. I'd love to shift gears just briefly to talk a little bit about your nonprofit, Thru My Eyes, and make sure the audience is aware of that and understands kind of, the mission behind that.
Thank you. It's called Thru My Eyes, and THRU, and it offers free clinically guided videotaping for chronically medically ill individuals who want to leave a video legacy for their children and loved ones. And the story behind that is, I had a friend, unfortunately, she was 36 at the time, and she had a 9-year-old daughter and was dying of her second bout of breast cancer, which was awful. And she was consulting with me on, because she wanted to do a videotape for her daughter on what questions she should respond to. Anyway, I did research, found out that there was nothing out there. And the hospital, she was in a very premier formative, hospital in the city, and they did not offer. I did some research. I found out that they actually did offer it in the hospital. You had to pay an exorbitant amount of money. It had to be done at the hospital, and the person would just talk directly into the camera on their own. And there was no guidance at all. So because of all of those reasons, I felt like it would be so helpful, especially at end of life, for somebody to have a guidance and support while they're doing it. I came up with, basically created a questionnaire of over 200 questions where people could I'd customize it for the person based on the topics that they want to respond to, which they find really helpful. And then also it's free. It's a free service. And now what I'm trying to do, which has been quite frustrating, I have to say, is before COVID, I offered it. We used to go into people's homes with a videographer. Then I started doing it online and offering it like nationally. So that is my goal. And the last person that I videotaped, I could tell you, I videotaped this woman with 7 children who did not have access to the internet. She went to her doctor's office to videotape. Now, this is a person who has very little means, and she would never have access to a service like this. Okay, those are the people I want to reach. I want to reach everybody. I want everybody to have access to this who wants it. And I want them to do it in a therapeutic, caring, connected way, so they feel that it is actually helpful and beneficial for them and their family.
And what has your experience been, maybe even if you just want to share one experience of what has that meant to the person that's recorded it, and maybe what back then, or what has it meant to the people who've received it?
But I tell you, it has been, feedback from both family, because it's also the person who's videotaping. It is their family who it's left to. I could tell you, and the beautiful thing is my friend who I created this for had a chance to see this develop. and she was so appreciative. I cannot even tell you, because I sat and I customized this questionnaire for her and she was able to benefit from it. They are so thankful. And sometimes it's deeply emotional, depending on how the person is processing. Sometimes I'll tear because I'll ask them, what would you say to your child as they're walking down the aisle, getting married? What would you want them to know? What lesson? Right? So sometimes it gets really intense and emotional, and I find myself tearful because I connect to my emotions. And they say to me, I don't know how you do this. Or they'll say to me gosh, and I'll say, thank you for being so transparent and opening up and connecting and sharing your story with me. I'm so honored, and we don't have this ability. People typically, they'll write something to their child or whatever, but connecting the voice and the picture and the life lessons, that whole experience is so unique. They are so appreciative. I cannot even tell you. They thank me and they say to me, I would never do this. I would never know about it. And some people have a hard time connecting with the mortality and they wait too long, I've done it at hospice. I've done it at people's homes. I've done it all over, wherever they want to do it. And even I've done it for people who, had the assistance and guidance of a loved one because they had a hard time, speaking. We take breaks if they need it, because they're not feeling well. But it is an exceptionally helpful experience. The other thing which I'm really connected to also is I want this to also change how we think about palliative care, what people need and want when they're dying. So a part of what I also want to do is research. I want to know that because I want to be able to add to the theory and knowledge base of palliative care, because I think that is so important.
Well, Michelle, that's a beautiful mission. If people want to get involved and help with Thru My Eyes, what is the best place to reach out or donate or contribute?
Yeah, so I am looking literally for partnerships. I have no ego in this whatsoever. I really want to just help people. I'm so passionate about it. I have a business plan. I have a little video excerpt from, people speaking about their experience and the benefit. So I'm happy to share. The best thing to get in touch with me on whatever you're interested in. I have my Psychology Today blog. I blog every month. I have an article. I just actually published one yesterday, which is on 9 tips for deepening connection and communication in relationships. That was my latest one I just published. So I'm always writing. I publish every Thursday morning at 11 a.m. on my YouTube channel, a new guided meditation on all different topics. So I'm always trying to just filter information and help people as much as I can. And just go on my website. There's a quiz actually on my website too. If you want to understand where the stuckness lies, because I have different kind of realms of where our stuckness lies. You could take the quiz, and my, information about my book, my TED Talk, everything's there. Yeah, best place.
All right. So we'll put all the links in the show notes, but please feel free to go check out Michelle's work, get her book. And Michelle, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you.
Hey, before you go, I have a small request. Our mission is to empower as many people as possible to maximize their potential through the power of leverage. Could you help us in this mission by leaving a review on iTunes, Spotify, or YouTube? And if you know just one person who would benefit from today's episode, would you please share it with them? Your support means the world to us, and we are thrilled to have you in the community. Thank you for being a part of our journey and helping us grow. You can find show notes for today's show and past shows at lessonsinleverage.com, which also has links to connect with me personally and connect with our various podcast channels across your favorite social networks. A big thanks to Solve.cloud, who sponsored this episode. They're a group of expert consultants that help SaaS and financial services companies to implement, optimize, and manage Salesforce.com. They can help you with custom integration solutions and are helping customers to implement some of the most important generative AI technologies. You can find them at solved.cloud. That's SOLVD.cloud is the URL. Thanks again, and we'll talk soon.